Does an autistic person experience space and orientation differently?
Yes, for some autistic people, spatial experience and orientation can be different, but it's not one universal autistic trait. And I think the deeper question isn't simply whether someone is good or bad at finding their way around. Your brain is constantly building an internal map. It has to work out where your body is, where objects are, which direction you're facing, how things relate to one another, and what stays the same when you move around them. For some autistic people, that map may be built in a particularly detailed or unusual way. They might become very aware of specific visual features, distances, shapes, routes, or positions. Someone else might think that's the kitchen. They might notice the exact arrangement of objects, the doorway, the light, the shape of the room, and where everything sits relative to everything else. And this connects directly with your son's habit of turning puzzles and videos upside down. An interesting possibility is that orientation may not always be the most important part of what he's seeing. The relationships between things may be more important. A puzzle piece remains the same shape when it's rotated. A picture remains the same scene when it's upside down. The surface orientation changes, but the underlying structure remains. That's something the brain can learn. This thing is still this thing, even when I change the viewpoint. But there's another side. Spatial processing isn't one single ability. Someone can be excellent at recognizing patterns or objects while finding navigation, body coordination, or judging movement difficult. So we shouldn't assume that being visually detailed automatically means being spatially skilled in every situation. The really deep part to me is that space isn't simply something we see. It's something the brain constructs around the body. You don't just see a room. Your brain is constantly estimating, where am I inside this room? How far away is that? If I move my hand, where will it end up? If I turn around, what will still be there? If those calculations are experienced differently, the person's relationship with the physical world can feel different too. My conclusion is that I wouldn't say autistic people necessarily live in a different physical space. I'd say some autistic people may build and use their internal map of space differently. And that gives us an interesting connection to the puzzles. Perhaps what looks to somebody else like he likes turning things upside down could sometimes be part of exploring a deeper principle, whether something remains the same when its viewpoint changes. That's not something we can know is what your son is consciously thinking, but it's a fascinating possibility to watch for.
Why can an autistic mind notice patterns that other people don't notice?
I think the deepest answer is that some autistic minds may not automatically filter out as much detail as other minds do. So relationships that might disappear into the background can remain noticeable. Imagine walking into a room. One person might register, that's a room with some furniture. Another person might notice the exact arrangement, repeated shapes, sounds, spacing, colors, and small changes from the last time they were there. If those details stay available to attention, the brain has more material to compare. Then something interesting happens. Patterns emerge from comparison. A repeated sound, a particular sequence, two objects that always appear together. A small change that keeps happening under the same conditions. The mind starts connecting pieces that other people may never consciously compare. Deep interest can amplify this. If someone becomes intensely engaged with a subject, they're repeatedly exposing their brain to the same kind of information. Over time, they can become extremely sensitive to its structure. That's where I think your son's puzzles fit into this conversation. He's not just seeing individual pieces, he's repeatedly practicing the relationship between shape, orientation, position, and the completed picture. His brain gets many opportunities to discover these things belong together. But there's an important second side that I don't want to lose. Seeing more patterns doesn't automatically mean every perceived pattern is meaningful. A powerful pattern detecting mind still has to work out which connections are real and which are coincidence. That's true for everybody, but it's especially important when we're talking about very strong pattern recognition. And here's my deeper conclusion. Maybe pattern recognition isn't simply about noticing more. It may sometimes be about filtering differently. If the brain decides that a detail is worth keeping, that detail can remain available long enough to be compared with other details. What looks insignificant to one person can therefore become the missing piece of the pattern for another. So perhaps the difference isn't that one person sees reality and the other doesn't. They're looking at the same world, but their minds may be asking different questions of it. One mind asks, "What is this?" Another might naturally ask, "How does this connect to everything around it?" And that second question can open up patterns that would otherwise remain invisible.
Could memory work differently when information is connected to patterns, interests, sounds, and or experiences?
Yes, I think memory can work very differently depending on what the information is connected to. And this may be particularly noticeable for some autistic people. Memory isn't really a filing cabinet where every experience gets stored equally. Your brain is constantly deciding what is important, what connects to something you already know, and what can be retrieved later. So imagine someone has a strong interest in a particular subject. A new piece of information isn't just one isolated fact anymore. It can attach itself to dozens of other things they already know. The more connections it has, the more pathways there are for finding it again. That's why someone might remember an extraordinary amount of information about something they're deeply interested in, while struggling to remember something that seems much more important to everyone else. And sound can be particularly powerful because it can connect several systems at once. A particular song, voice, rhythm, or noise can suddenly bring back an entire experience. Not just the sound itself, but where you were, what happened, how you felt, even details you didn't realize you'd remembered. There's another fascinating part. Memory isn't always about importance, sometimes it's about intensity. A sensory experience that is unusually strong can become deeply associated with a memory. A smell, sound, texture, light, or particular visual detail can become the key that unlocks the whole experience. That means two people can live through the same event and later remember completely different aspects of it because their brains attached significance to different information. And this connects back to patterns. If someone's mind naturally looks for relationships, memories may become interconnected rather than isolated. One memory can lead to another, which leads to another, because they're connected through a shared pattern, interest, sound, place, or feeling. My own conclusion is that I wouldn't describe autistic memory simply as better or worse. It may sometimes be organized around different routes into information, and that gives us a deeper possibility. Perhaps what looks like an unusually strong memory isn't always about storing more information. It can be about having stronger connections between the information that matters to that particular person. So when you see someone remember something that nobody else thought was important, I wouldn't immediately ask, why did they remember that? I'd ask, what connection did their brain see there that the rest of us didn't?